Good afternoon, my name is Olga Atamanova and I want to thank everybody who joins Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform. It's been 9 years of the war and today is day 376 of the full-scale invasion of our homeland by Russian aggressor, and now we will be talking about the work of our Air Force. Joining us online is Iurii, Ihnat, Speaker of the Air Force Command of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Good afternoon, Mr. Iurii. Good afternoon, Mr. Iurii. Today in the morning, the head of the military administration of Dnipro region reported about the strike on the Dnipro region by Shahed drones. So what was going on in the morning? What is the aftermath of this attack? Well, it's not only about Dnipropetrovsk region, but the air command of different regions of the country were working. The enemy inflicted the strike from Bryansk region from the north. 15 drones were spotted and 13 of them were shot down, 12 by Air Force and 1 by the Air Defense Forces of the Land Forces of Ukraine. The drones were intercepted in a number of regions of Ukraine, so the Air Defense Forces did a great job and we have to thank them for their efficient performance. Mr. Iurii, what is the dynamics observed lately? What does the enemy use mostly? And can we counter those forces that they use? Recently you mentioned that Russians started using new bombs, new guided aviation bombs, so can you give us a little bit more color on that? Well, here in Defense Express and other resources there was an announcement about the guided bombs used by the enemy. Well, there are different types of guided aviation bombs. They have their wings and they can loiter and they can be guided by GPS. Those are very dangerous types of ammunition because we know that there are not so much missiles left with the enemy that they can use, but if they arrange the manufacturing of these guided aviation bombs or they improve what they have, we see that what's happening when a big number of bombs with big capacity is coming down on the heads of Ukrainians. We've seen Mariupol, we see Bakhmut, there is artillery working there and aviation which inflicts powerful strikes on daily basis. Those are the new challenges that we have to take seriously. What we have to do is to improve our air defense capabilities. Once again, I want to remind you that yesterday it was the Sunday factor, so to say, when one of the mass media publishes somewhat distorted information and everybody picks it up and starts producing not very high quality information which our partners perceive in not quite a correct manner. And I want to thank Ukrinform that you were the ones who represented the information properly in TV Marathon at 12 o'clock, that we need the weapons, the air defense systems, MT and Patriot and F-16 fighters that are capable of countering these type of threats. By threats I mean the Russian aircraft, the fixed-wing aircraft, the Russian fighters, Su-34, which are capable of dropping those types of bombs. So we need the weapons which can counter Russian fixed-wing aircraft to drive them away from our borders to efficiently fight them. And someone just said that we need F-16 to fight the Russian bombs, so we had to correct our colleagues so they don't distort the information, because our partners read us and we have to treat it with understanding. Everything is being translated and documented in a prompt manner. And yes, we need Patriots and some the systems that can reach to a long distance, up to 150 kilometers. They can shoot down the missiles from air platforms as well, so the supply of Western aircraft to Ukraine is quite actual. So talking about those bombs, our existing capabilities, can we counter these type of threats, these type of weapons? Well, just like I've mentioned, we have to destroy their aircraft. Well, not to destroy them, but not to let them approximate our territory, because the bombs, they just like missiles, they can fly for a long distance, but the bombs are more numerous, and that's why they may result in a more in a destruction of a bigger scale. So we just don't have to let those aircraft come close to our borders. Well, talking about F-16, recently the American mass media reported that the first Ukrainian pilots already came to United States for assessment of their capabilities of mastering F-16. Can you give us a couple of comments on that? Well, there is not so much to comment. NBC News reported what they reported. Those are the statements of their congressmen, that there are pilots, and I want to remind you that our pilots are servicemen, specifically the Air Force servicemen, are in permanent touch with the representatives of NATO, with our allies, to be able to analyze the situation, how they can help Ukraine, how can they support Ukraine, what systems could help us in future. We mean that one of the examples is those pilots, where we were actually talking about the simulators. They were analyzing them together with in cooperation with our allies, with our partners, how much time will our pilots need to master the Western systems. And we understand that the philosophy of piloting and equipment of this material is a little bit different from a Soviet one, and that's why the pilots will need a little bit more time to master these Western machines. And in cooperation with our partners, this question is being studied, how much time is needed for training, for theory, for practice, and for training of the maintenance teams who would be capable of maintaining this type of aircraft in Ukraine. Well, I cannot help but asking about the reserves of the missiles and Shaheds with the enemy. We understand that probably application of the guided bombs is the sign that they're running out of those types of weapons. Well, everybody wants to think that they're running out of missiles, but we don't have to come to some hasty conclusions. Russia will do everything possible to acquire more weapons in their war with Ukraine. We already feel it from their statements in the mass media. We see that the occupiers regret more and more about that they're running out of ammunition, that their reserves are being exhausted, but don't come to hasty conclusions that they already ran out of them. But Russia will do everything possible again. They will resort to the third countries to procure ammunition, shells, missiles. So we have to improve anti-drone capabilities, we have to improve our air defense capabilities and find new sources of support. Dear colleagues, if you have any questions on the floor, please go ahead. Yulia Gadina, Ukrinform. My first question is about the UAVs. Can you please tell us from which direction we observe the most dense launches and the most frequent launches of drones by the enemy? Well, before that, before the deoccupation of the right bank of Dnieper, the drones were usually coming from Crimea, from Crimean Peninsula, and from occupied part of the Kherson region. When we deoccupied the right bank of Kherson region, they moved their launching platforms in the depth of the occupied territories, and they started launching them from the shore of the Azov Sea, and they Air Command South and Air Command East was meeting them most frequently, and they were flying along the current of the Dnieper River, where they were shut down by the Air Command Center and sometimes even reaching the Kyiv region. So it's the third attack by Shaheds that they launched from the north, from Bryansk region. We've seen it a couple of months ago. There were launches of UAVs from Belarus along the current of Dnipro, just like their fixed-wing aircraft were coming into Ukraine. The enemy uses the landscape and the river current to be less observable, so we can spot them. But our servicemen already worked well in this area, and the results of shooting down of both UAVs and missiles are quite decent. Do you have any information on the reinforcement of air defense forces of the enemy in their airfields? I mean, in the airfields used by the Russians. Do you mean Belarus airfields? Well, if so, we see that the guerrillas were able to reach the Russian aircraft with just using a quadrocopter drone. So any airfield, any military organism, they have some even banal air defense capabilities, just like surface-to-air missiles and some maybe portable air defense systems used by land forces. Do they have anything like that in their airfields? Obviously they do, because airfields are something that has to be protected, but they mostly defend their capital, the bunker of Putin. Well, maybe not even one bunker like that, and the main mass of their air defense capabilities is concentrated along the front lines, along the forward edge of the battle area. Obviously all those air defense systems in Belarus and along the border in Bryansk region, obviously in occupied Crimea, but the forward edge of the battle area in southeastern direction has the most concentration of all those systems. Buk, Tor, Panzer, S-300, S-350, S-400, those are the systems that we observe in that direction mostly. And if I may, another question: you already mentioned training of Ukrainian pilots abroad. If you can give us a couple more comments on that, can you disclose the number of such pilots being trained abroad and mastering the Western material? There's nothing to add. Just like we said to servicemen, they don't undergo training, but they currently study the issue of how our pilots are ready to master the Western material. We don't even talk about the certain type of aircraft, how many times they will need to master our new systems. They try their capabilities on the simulator. It's just like a game, because like a full-scale simulator is resembles 100% the cockpit of an aircraft. But when we decide on the type of aircraft which will be supported to Ukraine, that would be a collegial decision of our partners, because Ukraine cannot undertake a decision like that on ourselves. And then we will start talking about some pilots who may be sent to this or that country to master certain type of aircraft we dream about. So talking about the front line, about the forward edge, do you observe any change in tactics of the Russians in the skies? Well, the tactics of the Russians changes depending on their goal. As of today, their tactics is the support of land forces in the eastern direction. Well, obviously there are fights for the fortress of Bakhmut, and the activity of aviation is very high there. Su-34 is the fourth aircraft of that type destroyed recently in that area. Since the beginning of the war there was a lot of them down, but I don't remember for a long time that they would have been shut down. And as with respect to jeopardization of the situation in the eastern direction, their tactics will change respectively. You see, they inflict about 30-40 strikes per day, and our aviation obviously responds well up to 20 strikes, and when we can, we inflict more on them. Mr. Iurii, thank you for this broadcast. Thank you for joining us and reporting this latest news to us. I'm reminding you, joining us was Iurii Ihnat, the spokesperson of the Air Force Command of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Our team is working for the schedule of events for tomorrow, so please follow our announcements. Bear with us, trust in our armed forces, and work together for our victory. Glory to Ukraine.